Great. I can see Tomoko and Jackie. Hi guys. I can see Bex coming in and Karina and iPad. Is that us? No, someone else with the same name.
Like an episode of Romper Room, you know, with a little glass. I can see Billy and Johnny.
I've been learning from Lyndall. She likes to do a roll call at the start. Hi guys, welcome everyone. Are we live on Facebook too?
Yep.
That's fantastic. Welcome everyone. Where else would you want to be on a Friday night? Too cold to go out. Perfect weather for staying at home and learning something new. Finding out a bit more about our beautiful eco village and some of the talented members that are here. Like our unflappable Lincoln.
Except I've just brought up Facebook Live as well, and the delay is really disconcerting. So I'm not gonna have that on the screen. I just thought in case there's comments and stuff there.
Yeah.
A
few more people coming in. Welcome everyone. You can see Gregory and Steph and Josiah and did I say Nerida? There we go. Hi guys. Welcome.
Hello.
Yeah, Lincoln, you might not want to watch multiple screens at once. It might throw you a bit.
I just want to see if anyone dials in from the pub on a Friday night.
Oh yeah.
That would be a sign of success, I reckon.
Well, I think there's only 10 of them, isn't there?
Yeah, that's right.
No, so we'll take Lincoln will take questions through our Zoom chat function as well as on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
I'll kind of filter them, and often they come in kind of thematic waves, or people will be like, wait, stop, slow down, tell me again. Yeah. So that's great. We'll just give it a couple more minutes to let a few other people join us. You look a bit cold there, Lincoln, with that heater.
Yeah, I've just turned it on. It's actually too hot.
Few more people joining us tonight. Hopefully everyone's able to get themselves warm and settled in. I love doing these Friday night chats because often I see people, you know, like sitting on the couch, you know, either by themselves or with a partner and a cup of tea or a wine or something. I thought that was a big block of camembert. There you go.
I've got some things to show and tell.
Fantastic. You haven't eaten them yet?
No, not quite big enough.
What, you or the mushrooms? That's great. A few more people are coming in. Oh, that's fantastic. Someone on Facebook saying they've got their wine. They're ready to go.
Good work.
That's how to do it. It's too cold to go out anyway. Oh, that's great. It's so good when other people have kids in the background. Lincoln, is that August I can hear?
Yep.
I just saw on Crystal's screen a child walk past as well, because sometimes, usually my kids are asleep for this, but sometimes they wake up and yell, and then John has to step in and do some chatting. So we'll give it one more minute for the slowpokes to join us. Oh, nice. Steph, you're saying you got wine and sourdough. Oh, very nice. That's just fancy. Yeah, we've had quite a few members here at the Eco Village take up bread making in the last few months. Lincoln, have you been a bread maker?
Yeah, I got some sourdough off Deb. A sourdough starter. I think I killed it.
Oh.
It's a lot of effort.
Ah, unlucky mushrooms.
Yeah. You go to a fairly low maintenance starter and it ends up being all right.
Yeah.
I haven't had an oven in a month and a bit, so I'm house sitting just so I can bake.
That's fantastic. I think it's great when you don't have to go and like talk to it and pat it and stuff, when you just, you know, feed it, get on with it.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we might make a start. What I might do is just mute everyone for now. And then if you do have questions as we go along, please feel free to drop them into the chat box, which should be at the bottom of your screen. I'd like to welcome everyone. My name's Vanessa and I'm hosting the Friday night chat this week. And I'm supported with the tech side of things by my husband, John. And tonight we're chatting with Lincoln. Lincoln is a member here at the Narara Eco Village. And in fact, it was Lincoln who showed John and I and our kids around when we first joined.
Oh, is that right?
5 years ago. So he's been around for a little while. And one of the things Lincoln is passionate about is mushrooms. Lincoln, do you want to introduce yourself? You don't have to focus so much on the mushrooms, but we are chatting mushrooms tonight.
Yep. Yeah, so like Vanessa said, I've been involved with the Eco Village for about 5 or 6 years now. Currently on the board of directors, and I also manage the smart grid, so the electricity side of the Eco Village as well. So developing our community battery and the solar panels and all that entails. So mushrooms are kind of my weekends job. I have a corporate job that I do 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, but mushrooms are very much my outlet, I guess, my creative outlet or my hands-on outlet away from the computer.
That's great. And look, you're a pretty busy man, but you still manage to find a lot of time and love to pour into the mushrooms. And some of you may have seen, we made a bit of a teaser video in this week before, and some of you might have seen that. But tonight, what we're actually going to start off by doing is showing you a bit more about the process of growing mushrooms that Lincoln's involved with here. And so we might just flick that video on now and take some questions afterwards. Just give us a moment. Let's see, how's that look?
All right, so this is shed 30, and it's normally used for the land team, but we've sectioned off a little part of it to grow the mushrooms. We've got this room, which I'm calling the lab, mainly because it's got the lavender flowwood. Now, this was left over from the old horticultural research station, so we've managed to reclaim it, get it fixed up, so we can use it for mushrooms, but also other, anything that needs a sterile environment.
Couldn't see anything there, Vanessa.
Yep, I've got the tech guy onto it. Sorry, guys. We're trying to be fancy tonight. Let's see if this goes.
That looks better.
All right, so this is shed 30, and it's normally used for the land team, but we've sectioned off a little part of it to grow the mushrooms. We've got this room, which I'm calling the lab, mainly because it's got the lavender flowwood. Now, this was left over from the old horticultural research station, so we've managed to reclaim it, get it fixed up, so we can use it for mushrooms, but also other, anything that needs a sterile environment. So this is the lab. Next door, we've got the inoculation room where the substrate sits for a couple of weeks, which I'll show you in a minute. And then we've got the grow room over the back there to grow all the mushrooms. This is just a hobby. I've been studying mushrooms for about 3 or 4 years now. I like everything about foraging to identifying to photos to growing, everything about them. I think it's just mystical and quite amazing to the process. So fundamentally, there's 3 stages to growing mushrooms. One is preparing and inoculating the substrate, which I'm doing with sawdust in a pressure cooker. Once that's sterile, I'll inoculate it with some mushroom spawn that I buy from Aussie Mushroom Suppliers. Plug for them, they're a brilliant company. And then once it's inoculated, they go into the grow room for about 2 weeks. And then the third part is obviously putting them in the fruiting room and harvesting the fruit. So you can do each part yourself, or you can jump to, just particular parts. If you just want the fruit, you can buy those pre-made kits that you get from Bunnings or from Aussie Mushroom Supply or Life Cycle. There's a few of them, and just get the mushrooms, or you can take control of the whole process by taking it substrate, inoculating it, and then going right through. All right, so when you're sterilising the substrate, so this is just sawdust, and it's just a good old standard pressure cooker. It needs to be at 15 psi for about 2 hours. So this is the first time I'm opening it. It will be a bit hot still. And these are the bags. So I'm going to take these bags and put them in the flow hood to cool down. And these are completely sterile. Now the problem with it being completely sterile is it's very prone to contamination at this stage. It's the most vulnerable part. So this is sawdust, which I've mixed back with soy hulls, which is normally used for cattle feed, horse feed. I can normally get about 6 bags in here. And then I'm also sterilising some normal grain to make my own seed, mushroom seed basically. So I'll take the existing mushroom seed, inoculate this, and then use that to inoculate more sawdust or straw. So the idea is that if I can propagate my own seed, then I can reduce the overall costs of growing mushrooms. Okay, so this is the inoculation room. The bags will stay in here for a couple of weeks, but come and have a look. So the first one's here. So I've inoculated those on the 11th of July, and you can see the mushrooms, mycelium, starting to colonise in different states. So you can see it branching out from that seed. So these are all colonising nicely. Now these are some that I've done a little while ago that are almost ready for fruiting. So this was done the 31st of May, and that's pretty much completely colonised. So the next step is to move that into the fruiting chamber.
What do you mean by colonised?
So the mycelium, or the mushroom roots, take over all the material. It's the mushrooms are sometimes described as an inverted human, where we've got our stomach on the inside and we've got all the enzymes that break it down, whereas mushrooms have their stomach on the outside. They extrude a protein which breaks down the material to then go back in to create the fruit and the spores. So these are all colonising. I've got big bags, little bags, different substrates. I'm playing around with different recipes to see what works best. So these are all staying here for a couple of weeks.
Cool.
So there's two main ways of growing mushrooms, either in the bags, which I don't really like because they're single-use plastics, or the other way with some types of mushrooms you can grow them in buckets. So these have got holes drilled in them. I've got some pasteurised straw, which I use a lime for. I inoculate it, and it will stay in here for a couple of weeks, depending on the temperature. Before I move them to the fruiting chamber, and the mushrooms will grow out of those holes once I remove the seed. So when working with mushrooms, it's really good to keep as sterile environment as possible. So if I'm handling the mushrooms, I always use, it's just isopropyl. And here, we've got a bag of, these are blue oysters or elms, I can't quite remember. But these are ready to harvest. I've left them here. They're a little bit older now because they're turning up at the edges, but I've left them here just for this video. So
that's awesome. Thank you.
Take some of those home. This is some yellow oysters. Again, they're getting a little bit old, and you can see you've got the fungus gnats, which fruit flies basically. They're attracted to the yellow, so I've got the yellow sticky trap up here to try and keep those low. And then we got gifted, a village member's friends got gifted this old lion's mane. So this is where you can buy a pre-made package. And this one was lion's mane, and that's the mushroom growing there, which is pretty much ready to harvest. And you can see this block is getting old. It's got some wild fungi and stuff, which really shouldn't be in here. It's a clean environment. And then thirdly are the buckets down there with some pink oysters growing at the side. So this shed is normally a hydroponics shed, so it's all not insulated, but it's got the reflective coating. It's got beams across the top for the lights. That's just a blue LED, and you can hear the humidifier has just kicked in. I've got it on a sensor, so it will keep it about 85% relative humidity. So that's dropped down to 76, so the humidifier kicked in. The humidifier is just made up of a box with a pond fogger that you normally use for landscaping. It triggers it, it creates the mist, and I've got a fan that blows that mist in. And that will now boost it up to 85% and turn off. Cool. The lights are on 12 hours on, 12 hours off. And I've also got an extra fan to blow the excess carbon dioxide out. The mushrooms are growing, they produce a lot of carbon dioxide, which is not good. You get long, spindly mushrooms, so you need to flush that out periodically. So I've got a separate fan for that. These are ready to harvest, so I would pick those off, and there's enough. Put put them in a brown paper bag and they get gobbled up by the village members pretty quickly. I'm certainly selling more than I can produce at the moment. So started off, we did a course. One of our village members organised a guy to come and do a day-long course where he sort of taught us more about mushrooms, and we made some oyster mushrooms in a plastic bag. And really it was just, I think that ignited my passion and just went from there. Did a lot of research and eventually came across a company called the National Mushroom Network, who offered the kits, so you could buy just the family unit, which is where I started, right up to cafe size with small shed to do hundreds of kilos a week to really sell to cafes and whatnot. They've been a great learning resource. They also supply a lot of the bags that we use and some other things like that. So that really gave it a good kick, and then from that sort of known quantity that what works, I've just expanded on that and sort of adjusted different things to suit the particular operations here. So the family kit is just a shed, probably 2 meters by 1.5 meters by 0.5 meter deep, something you probably put your bikes or your toys or something in. It was just modified slightly, so you have just a normal home humidifier on a timer with a fan to push the carbon dioxide out and give it fresh air. And that was basically it. It had some shelving units, and that was enough. If you bought the bags from another provider, you could just get the bags, cut them open, and then eat the mushrooms. But I wanted to take more control of the whole process, so upgraded to the new shed to get more, and then also the laminar flow hood and inoculating my own substrates. Small scale family, I mean, you can buy those pre-made kits. I wouldn't recommend places like Bunnings. I think you sort of get hit and miss with the quality of those. But if you were to buy those kits from Aussie Mushroom Supply or Life Cycle, one of those people, you could probably get, they're about $40, $50 a kit, and you can put that in your laundry or your bathroom and just mist it every now and again, and the mushrooms will come up, and you could start very easily from that. If you wanted to step up, then it's going to that model, that sort of arrangement that I said before with the sheds and the humidifier, and that will allow you to do a couple of kilos a week, depending on the temperature and whatnot. And for that shed and the shelving units and all the rest of it, you're probably talking $500-$600. And then the bags, to buy them, a pack of 12 will cost about $150-$200. And then you get variable amounts of mushrooms on those. So it's far more economical if you can learn to inoculate your own substrate. And you don't need a laminar flow hood for that. You can do what they call a still air box, where you get a normal plastic box from Bunnings, you cut some holes in it for your hands, and you do all your work in there, and that just minimises the airflow and the risk of contamination. So you can just do that. So you just incrementally change the processes, step up, and you get more complicated as you learn more, but also reducing your costs so you can get more food for bang for buck. Another way of growing mushrooms, which takes a lot longer, which I think produces nicer mushrooms, is actually inoculating logs, like you sort of mimic more what happens out in the real world. So there's a few of us in the eco village that whenever we come across a tree that's been felled, and we try and grab the logs. And what happens here is we drill little holes in, and we use an inoculated mushroom dowel. We whack it in, and then we cover it with a bit of soy wax just to keep the contaminants out. And it takes about a year for the mushrooms then to take over this entire log and then start fruiting. So these ones here are turkey tail. Turkey tail is more of a medicinal mushroom that you have in your tea. You don't really eat it, it's very leathery. But we've done this with shiitakes and lion's mane as well. So this is, each year, if we can do 30, 40, 50 logs, then you just increase. Once this has started fruiting, it will fruit for 3 to 5 years until it's used up all the wood. So, one thing I've seen more and more online is people making these logs and then selling somebody this entire log, and then they can get their own mushrooms as they fruit year on year.
That's crazy. So it's kind of like a waste-free Bunnings kit.
It is. Yeah, because you could use this as your garden hedging or your around your vegetable patch, and then every now and again you get the fruit of the mushrooms, and then when it's fully used up by the mushrooms, it will be a lot lighter from what it was originally, because all the wood's been eaten, and then that will just return to compost quite quickly.
There you go. Lincoln, that was your first time seeing the video tonight too. What did you think? Oh, hang on, you're muted. How do we fix that?
There we go. Quite disconcerting seeing yourself on video. I'm certainly not used to it.
That's great. I really appreciated you being able to walk through the process. It's my, I've done the Bunnings box before, but anything further than that, and it's like, wow, a total new world for me. Let's just see. Oh, nice. You're getting some nice feedback here. People are liking what you're doing on Facebook. Karina, you raise a valid point. Karina's saying that she's concerned about bacteria and contamination and totally ready to get started, but she doesn't want to like make her family sick with a funky mushroom. So have you ever had mushrooms that have gone off?
No, I haven't. I think it's one of those, I can't remember the scientific law that, if you've inoculated something with a particular type of mushroom and a mushroom pops out that looks like that mushroom that you planted, it's a pretty good bet that it's the mushroom. It's going to be very unlikely. Mycelium is quite competitive, so they don't, in the wild, they certainly compete against each other. But when you're inoculating your own, if you keep it relatively sterile, you're not going to get wild, dangerous mushrooms that's going to infect your substrate and grow something funky that you weren't expecting. And to be honest, a lot of those type of mushrooms are not cultivated, and you can't cultivate them because they just need a particular environment or a particular, a symbiotic relationship or bacteria in the soil for them to fruit. The mushrooms that the gourmet mushrooms have been cultivated so that you can just use your standard sugarcane mulch or sawdust, and you're not going to find those funky, deadly mushrooms growing where you've planted them, where you've inoculated them. But in saying that, you do need to keep mold down. So if you think about it, you've got the fungi, but you've also got molds and you've got yeasts as well. So you do want to minimize those, but they're pretty obvious when you get the mushrooms and it's got a mold infection that, it's unlikely. I haven't seen it in 3 or 4 years I've been doing this. But it's pretty obvious. It'd be slimy, it'd be brown. It would just not look like the mushroom you're expecting to grow. You turf the whole bag. And if you have a bigger setup, then you'd want to clean that out and, wipe it down with some metho or some isopropyl alcohol. But very, very unlikely. And like I say, if you planted something and it's growing, if you planted tomato seed and a tomato looking plant grows out, it's probably the tomato plant you grew.
Seems to make sense. Question for those that are feeling kind of a bit overwhelmed by what Lincoln's got here at the Eco Village. Let's scale it right back to the beginning, Lincoln. If I want to just go and I just want to be eating mushrooms that I sort of grew myself in my laundry, yep. I go for the box thing. I've had the box before. I've had the Bunnings box, and I wasn't impressed with the output. Is there a way that you can improve the number of mushrooms you get with the boxes?
Yeah, so the ones you get from Bunnings are your standard button mushrooms. Your Agaricus button, I can never say it, but yeah, your button mushrooms. And they grow well. They're a type of mushroom that need a casing layer. So the substrate that they grow on is underneath, and they put a peat moss or something over the top of it. And as soon as you put that peat moss on there, you're introducing other bacteria and other wild fungi. And then that starts to compete with those button mushrooms. So you don't get a huge amount. Some people talk about getting mushrooms for weeks or months on end, and they have so many mushrooms, but it is very hit and miss. And I think it's because of that casing layer that you have to put on top. If you wanted to just get mushrooms, I would be looking at places like Aussie Mushroom Suppliers. They've been making mushroom material for, I think, 20 years. And are pretty much the go-to people, where they sell everything from the lab equipment to the pressure cookers, but also the do-it-yourself kits. And you can go there and choose, okay, well, I would like a lion's mane. They ship it to you in a bag that looks just like this. You cut it open. And one of the easiest ways, so mushrooms are quite a high percentage of water, so you need to keep the humidity up, otherwise they do dry out. And the simplest way to do that is to get a 30-litre box from Bunnings and put a layer of perlite down the bottom and pour some water in, and that will keep the humidity up. And put the bag of the mushroom bag on top, put the lid on, and that will keep the humidity really quite high, and the mushrooms will fruit from that. And then depending on the mushroom, there's different techniques that after you get your first flush of mushrooms, you can soak it in a bucket of water overnight and then put it back into that tub with the perlite and kick it off again. I really quite like shiitake mushrooms, or the way to get that first flush and sometimes the second flush. And literally what you can do, particularly if you're growing in logs, is take a baseball bat to it or pick it up and throw it on concrete. And what that does is actually simulates the tree falling over, and the mycelium goes, oh, the tree's fallen over, and starts fruiting. So you can use that same concept with your mycelium block, where you get the first couple of mushrooms and then just soak it in water and just whack it hard. And then in a couple more days later, the fruit will start popping up again. So you just sort of take on those natural processes and mimic those. But yeah, really quite simple. Just get that tub, keep the humidity up, and they'll fruit.
That's awesome. I've just actually been writing a couple of things down because I'm keen to give it a go again after watching this. So the shiitakes, you say the ones you bash, they're probably good for people with kids, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Get everyone involved in the
stress
growing.
people. Yep.
All right, got a couple of questions here. What do you do with all the mushrooms when you're not selling them to village members?
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to answer that first?
Doesn't happen often, but yep. What I do is I just put them in a dehydrator, and then they rehydrate very, very quickly in soups. Or I've been experimenting with putting them in the food processor and mixing them back with salt, making mushroom salt. Goes really well on steaks if you're that way inclined, or just as a seasoning. So mushroom salt is quite nice. Yeah, it's a dehydrator. It's the easiest way to store them. I've got mushrooms that I've dehydrated and I put in my tea all the time. The turkey tail is a really good example of that, actually. Picking that, I've got a big jar and I just put it in my teapot.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And I've got a question too about using peat.
Yep.
And whether there's alternatives for people that aren't interested in using peat.
The peat moss.
Yeah.
So peat moss, it goes back to that casing layer that I was talking about with button mushrooms. And generally with majority of the gourmet mushrooms, all the oysters, shiitake, lion's mane, all the common ones don't need a casing layer. So you don't need to delve into the peat at all. And I've experimented with it, but like I say, you get a high level of contamination. But it's a fine line because there's bacteria that's in the peat that actually help those type of mushrooms grow. So you don't want to pasteurize it or sterilize it because you'll actually break that beneficial bacteria relationship and you may not get the fruit that you're after.
Okay.
So you don't need to, the key message there is you probably don't need to use peat for a lot of those organic mushrooms.
Mm-hmm. And Lincoln, do you find, is there a difference in yield between different mushrooms? So say I just want a good mushroom that's going to crop or fruit well and provide bulk for my family.
Mm-hmm.
Are there particular varieties I'd look to?
Look, the oysters are the easiest growing and you can get some quite large ones. The thing with oyster mushrooms is that they're very temperature sensitive. So the gorgeous looking pink oysters really need a higher temperature. So I've got some pink oysters growing, but they're looking sad and they're not growing big and fleshy. So I'll grow those sort of later when it warms up. But then you can get cold strain oysters, so the blue oysters, elms. There's a few others, and if you go to Aussie Mushroom Suppliers, for instance, it will tell you if it's what temperature range. I've also created a Google sheet with all the different types of mushrooms you can buy from the common places, the minimum temperature, the maximum temperature, and the type of material it'll grow on. So that's freely available if anyone would like it. Happy to share that. And that's if you want to create your own substrate and inoculate it yourself.
Great. I'm just thinking what's probably the easiest
I think Tracy's happy about that.
What's the easiest way for people to let you know if they're interested in that? Would it be on our Facebook page where we're going to post this video up? Or
I don't know, you tell me what's the best way
to and message you. Or it might actually be easiest if they email our info at email address.
There we go, and we can share it that way. Yep.
So send the inquiries through to our website at nararaecovillage.com. There's a central email address there.
And we can share those. Yep.
Oh, that's great. All right, so say I've had the mushroom box thing and I want to upgrade, but I don't necessarily want to shell out a lot of money.
Yep.
I mean, the laminar flow hood looks quite full on.
Yep.
You mentioned like the box for the inoculating, the still air box.
if you're starting out, the simplest way, and going back to what you're saying with the type of mushroom being the oysters grow really well on straw. So just go down to your nursery. I use sugarcane mulch, sugarcane straw. And the simplest way is to get that another 30-litre tub. You know, I've got so many 30-litre tubs from Bunnings. It's incredible because they're just so handy. Pack it full of the sawdust, fill it up with water, and get yourself some hydrated lime or some builder's lime. You do need to check. There's two types of lime, and it's the builder's lime that you want. And that actually raises the pH in that water and actually kills all the most of the bad bacteria. So what you're not sterilizing like in the pressure cooker in the video, you're actually pasteurizing. And then you take that out and drain it. Oysters are pretty forgiving. And you put them in those buckets that you saw in the video as well with some holes drilled in. Sprinkle the mushroom spawn on it and then leave it for a couple of weeks and the mushrooms will start growing out the side. That is the simplest way. My kids help me with that whole process. I keep them away from the lime because I don't want them breathing that in. But when we take it out of the water and we're putting it into the buckets and we're spreading the mushroom seed around, fruits and oysters are very aggressive, so they take over that straw very, very quickly, and bad contaminants don't really have a chance. So that is the simplest way. You don't need a still air box, you don't need a laminar flow hood. You get some mushroom spawn that looks like this. It's just a rye grain or millet that's been inoculated with, and you take a handful of it and you sprinkle it onto the straw in layers, just like a lasagna, put the lid on, come back in a couple of weeks and you got mushrooms.
Cool. And Lincoln, traditionally, like I think of putting my mushrooms in the laundry. Is that where I'd put this bucket?
The reason why you put them in the laundry is because of the humidity. So that it's normally, you know, a relatively stable temperature and it's got high humidity. So anywhere where you've got the high humidity, if it's under the stairwell or if it's in the garage that you've got the door closed, those type of places will all work. And then just get a spray bottle and just spray it once or twice a day. That's kind of all it needs. Okay.
Could I have it in the bathroom or does it need to be like a constant humidity?
No. It's the bathroom would work fine. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you want a mushroom bag in your bathroom, but you know, each to his own.
It wouldn't be the strangest thing, Lincoln. All right, let's take this conversation back to mushrooms. I've got a question here about what you do with your mushroom bags when they've been finished with.
Compost. They just either straight onto the garden bed or into the compost heap or whatever. Sometimes I put a whole bunch of pink oyster spent mushroom compost in my raised garden bed, and I had all these pink oysters popping up. And I know a number of people have experienced that when they buy mushroom compost from Margin Mushrooms down at Woolway there. Quite often the agaricus will all pop up. So yes, the compost is the easiest way to get rid of it. Okay.
On that note, 2 follow-up questions. What about if it's like contaminated? Can you still shove that in the compost?
Yep, no worries. The main contaminant that you get, and here's one I prepared earlier. You can see that's quite a green mold. Now it's a type of fungus. It's called Trichoderma, and it's a fungus-eating fungus. It's a brutal world of nature, and that's fine. You put that in. So I haven't done a lot of research, but I have heard that Trichoderma is quite good for your compost in breaking things down. And you know, there's probably nastier things in most people's compost, and that's no issues at all.
Okay.
And what is quite interesting is that the mycelium generally, this might be going a little bit too technical, but majority of plants have a symbiotic relationship with mushrooms, and the plants will they'll get the photosynthesis and they'll get the sugars, and they'll feed that to the mycelium network through the roots, and in return the mycelium will break down other types of nutrients and feed that back to the plant. So they form this symbiotic relationship. So if you have a pot, you can see the soil dies quite quickly. But if you've got that mycelium and you've got the compost to break things down, and you've got that nice living soil, and that's just all part of the whole fungal network.
Wow, it's really a big picture, isn't it? the story?
The largest mushroom in the world is a honey mushroom. It's in Oregon. I think it's about the size of 300 football fields.
Wow.
I think it even might be bigger than that. And it doesn't fruit. It's just one great big mycelium mass underneath some trees, a forest in Oregon. And you can see it from space because the terrain changes where the mushroom is. It's a type of honey mushroom.
Wow.
So yes, the mycelium network through the ground is it's fascinating.
Wow, that's crazy. Having a comment coming through from Facebook about Trichoderma not going into the compost because it will compete with other bacteria. No, other good fungi.
Okay.
Do you have a comment on that?
I don't know enough about it. I've read that it's perfectly fine, but other people are probably more knowledgeable.
Yeah.
I'll certainly take it away and have a look because I've been throwing all mine in my compost and I'm hoping for good compost. And it is. So, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. One more question about your waste. So you mentioned that currently you're using the plastic single-use bags.
Mm.
And is that because there are some types of mushroom that you can't do in the buckets or just because it's easier?
Yeah, it comes down because that method of growing the mushrooms, they need to go in a pressure cooker, so they need to be sterilized. Getting a 20-litre bucket into a pressure cooker is awfully difficult, and that's the commercial level where they've got the big walk-in autoclaves. I have experimented with using yogurt containers, so the smaller things, and they are a type of material. Yes, it may leach bad things out of the plastic, but it will survive the pressure cooking process. And then you can put 2 or 3 of those into your pressure cooker, cut holes into the side, and you can do it that way, and you can reuse those. So it really comes down to the method of the mushrooms you're growing. Yeah, I don't like using the plastic because they are single use. I haven't quite found a way around that with these type of mushrooms I'm growing.
Oh, that's interesting. All right, so Tina, you've got a question here. You're saying, if I find that green contaminated in bags in her laundry, does that mean that her laundry is covered in the spores and that'll then contaminate other bags? Like, do you need to full on sanitize it all?
That's the common thinking, yes. If it has been, if you think that's the source of the contamination, then yes, you probably want to do a big clean before you try it again in that location. But it could also be other things. It could have got contaminated from other locations. Maybe the knife that you used to cut open the bag wasn't cleaned properly. There's other sources. I wouldn't say, you know, your whole laundry is now covered and you don't want to go in there because it's all horrible. But it would be good to do a pretty decent clean before you try it again.
Cool. Sorry, Lincoln, just juggling all the comments and questions coming in. Let's chat about use for a little bit. You've mentioned that you dehydrate it.
Yep.
I've got a question here. Have you ever tried mushroom coffee?
Yes, I have. Yeah, using the chaga mushroom. Yes, that's a wild harvested mushroom. There's a company. I mean, there's quite a few of them. There's a company from Byron Bay that I've been buying their coffee as well as their chocolate. So they've got a mocha infused with various different medicinal mushrooms, you know, with lion's mane or chaga or reishi. There's a number of different, nice mushrooms. I don't know if, you know, lion's mane is supposed to be quite good for neurodegenerative diseases. So protection against Alzheimer's and plaque buildup on the brain. I don't know if it's working for me. My brain seems to be working okay. Come back in 40 years' time and I'll let you know, I guess. I don't have too much to say on the medicinal value of it, apart from what you can read.
Yeah, cool. Thank you, Lincoln. So do you, in terms of like cooking and using your mushrooms, do you have favourite ways of using them?
Look, just the go-to is just garlic and butter. Just pan fry them up. You can't really go past that. I did find a recipe about a year ago for vegan chips, and you toss them in some oil and some spices of your choosing, and you just put them on a very low heat in the oven, and they come out as crispy chips, and they're very moorish. I took them to a dad's event at the Eco Village, and all the dads were gobbling them up. It was, you know, yeah, very non-traditional thing to be eating at a all-male event, but no, they disappeared very quickly.
Oh, that sounds awesome. And so if the dads are enjoying it, what about the kids? Because I know my kids are pretty fussy, and if I want them to eat mushroom, I've really got to sell it to them. And I mean, they have eaten and, dare I say, enjoyed yours, Lincoln.
Yep.
But that's because I say this is a special rare type of mushroom that Lincoln's grown.
Interestingly, yeah, it's mixed results with the kids, and they like some mushrooms and not others. And I think because mushrooms vary quite a lot in their texture and taste, I don't think any of my kids like standard button mushrooms, but they will eat shiitake mushrooms, for instance. They will eat some of the oyster mushrooms. So I would encourage people to try different types of mushrooms with their kids and see which ones they like. We've got one family, the kids will only eat shiitake mushrooms, and that's great. I mean, shiitakes are very tasty. Yeah, so I just try different sorts.
And I've certainly noticed that with my kids. I whenever I get a bag of mushrooms from Lincoln, I sort of open it up and I show the kids and I say, oh, look, these ones are pink or these are yellow. We've never seen yellow mushrooms. Try and sell it to them that way. And I mean, they say that getting kids involved in the cooking helps, but I don't know about that. There's some things they still won't get into. So let's chat a little bit about what you've been doing with the logs. I know there's a team of people here at the Eco Village that have been inoculating them. Whereabouts do you get the dowels from, the inoculated dowels? Do you make them?
Okay. So again, Aussie Mushroom Supplies has them. This is a dowel. It's just your stock standard dowel that you buy for any sort of woodworking. That's been it's been inoculated. So I don't know if you can see, but it's got the white mycelium run through it. So then when you get the log, and you need the log to sort of sit for a couple of weeks sometimes, particularly if you're using a eucalyptus log. Most plants will have an antibacterial or antifungicide in them, and you need that to decay. So once the limb has been chopped off, just leave it for a couple of weeks. Then you come back and you get the drill bit that fits those dowels. You do a diagonal sort of crisscross around the log. You get those dowels. Again, another excellent activity for the kids. My kids love doing this. Get a soft mallet and just whack them in. If you want to, it's good practice just to put a little bit of soy wax over the top, and that's just because you've created a hole into the interior of that log, and you just want to keep those contaminants out. And like I said on the video there, it does take a year for the mycelium to run through the various layers of the log, and then they'll start fruiting, not necessarily from where the dowels are, but anywhere it pops out. Like I said before, the shiitakes, if it's been a year and you haven't got any fruit, just take a baseball bat to it, and a couple of weeks you'll have mushrooms. You don't necessarily have to keep them wet. You don't have to keep them in the sprinkler and go out there and hose them every day. Just keep them in a cool shaded area somewhere in the garden, and the natural rain, you know, that's all they get in the wild, and they fruit fine. They're very low maintenance, and once they do start fruiting, you've got 3 to 5 years that they'll flush probably twice a year, or multiple times, but 2 times, and maybe flush 2 times throughout the year, and a couple of flushes each time.
Cool. And is there a particular type of wood that you look for when you're looking for logs to inoculate?
A hardwood. So it really needs to be a hardwood. If you use a softwood, it may work, but you won't get that 3 to 5 years. It will decompose that quite quickly, and you won't get the big, meaty, strong mushrooms just because there's just not enough of those nutrients that it's after. So we've had great success with eucalyptus of various different sorts, or angophoras.
Cool. That's certainly, that sounds like a less full-on kind of option, I think, for some of us that are new to it.
And certainly if you've got the space and you can wait, yeah, it's quite a simple solution. And that's why I mentioned in that video to use them just as your edging around your garden. So that's a very simple way. So you can use it, you set and forget. It gets a little bit of water when you water your garden, and you get mushrooms.
Yeah. And does it have to be, a question from Nerida here, does it have to be like a recently felled log, or can it be an old log that you've got sitting around?
You don't want it too old. So you wouldn't go over sort of 2 months would probably be getting too old. But if you had something, leave it for a couple of weeks. But no, I think a month to, you'd be pushing it for 2 months. I wouldn't go beyond that.
Mhm. And is that because it just starts using up that food store that you spoke about?
I think because it gets contaminated with the wild fungi, which it needs to compete with. So the organic mushrooms, you know, they will get out-competed by wild mushrooms. Or it's not necessarily mushrooms, it's mycelium, it's other fungal stuff. That's some of them won't fruit, but you still have that mycelium. If you ever picked up a log that's been sitting in the bush for a while, you pick up, you got that white mass all underneath it. That's mycelium, and that's just wild. That may be a fruiting type of mycelium, or it might not be.
Mm-hmm. And can we chat a bit, Lincoln, about kind of wild foraging or harvesting, you know, mushrooms around your property? Do you ever go and pick from the wild?
I do, but I caution against it. I think it's easy enough to go to the markets and get mushrooms, or come and talk to me and I can get you some mushrooms. And, you know, it's just, there's not too many mushrooms in the Central Coast region that will kill you. Very, very few. The really nasty ones are down in Victoria and Canberra. And if you hear about deaths, they tend to be down in, you know, Gippsland area. That's where a lot of the really bad ones that dissolve your liver and kidneys. So don't go foraging down there. But there are plenty that will make you quite sick around the Central Coast region. And you really need to know what it looks like, the mushroom. So there's a few sort of go-tos that are very, very easy to see once you know. The pine cap mushrooms and the saffron milk caps. You know, we've just come out of saffron milk cap season, and slippery jacks as well. But you hear stories of people up at Somersby, Carryong area going into those pine forests. That's where they all grow. So identifying mushrooms is you need to know the features. You also need to know the terrain that they're growing in. So quite a lot of mushrooms, the ones I just mentioned then, the pine caps and the slippery jacks, they have a symbiotic relationship with pine trees. So if you were to find an orange mushroom that you thought was a pine cap, but it was no pine trees around, pretty good chance it's not a pine cap. And that's another interesting one, the Amino Muscaria, which is the classic red with the white dots on it. You know, that one you see in all the fairy tales. That also has a symbiotic relationship with pine trees. So I've found the Amanita muscarias and the pine caps sitting next to each other. They look completely different. Yeah, I'd stay away from it unless you're with an experienced forager that really knows their mushrooms.
Sure, thank you. Here at the Eco Village, I've seen some of the inoculated logs in various locations, and you mentioned that some of them are inoculated with turkey tail.
Yep.
And can you remind me what it was that you do with that?
Yeah, so turkey tail, it grows wild. It's probably one of the ones I do harvest. I do wild forage because it's quite easily identifiable, and its lookalikes are not poisonous. You might not get the medicinal value from it, but it's certainly not going to do a huge amount of damage. It's a very leathery, it's a polypore mushroom, so it doesn't have your classic gills that you think about with mushrooms. It's got little pores underneath it, and it's very chewy. You can chew it, but it's better just in your teapot. So I just have my teapot, I put a little bit of dehydrated turkey tail in, and then I just refresh the teapot, leave that piece of mushroom in, and away you go.
And whilst we're talking about wild foraging, what about kind of backyard foraging? We've had the mushroom compost before, and we've had mushrooms come up, and we know not to go foraging because we don't know enough. But if it's in your backyard and it came out of the mushroom compost from down at Woy Woy, is that safe?
Look, it's a pretty big question. Going back to what I first said, look, if you've got spent mushroom compost and a mushroom that pops up looking like that mushroom, it's probably a pretty good chance that it is.
Yeah.
You know, the field mushrooms and the agaricus ones have, when they're young, they have pink gills that turn to black as they get old. They've got a little veil around it. So there's identifying features that if it ticks all those boxes, I would say okay, but yeah.
Not on the record, right?
Not on the record. Not something I'd advocate.
Lincoln, we've got a couple of questions just going back to what you were talking about with the straw and the shiitakes and the buckets. James on Facebook would like to know why you use the builder's lime over the dolomite.
Good question, and I was going to refresh my memory on that. It's something to do with the magnesium levels in it, and I can't remember which way, if you want the magnesium or if you don't want the magnesium, but there's something there where to do with the magnesium. You want to increase the pH up to about 12 or 13, where it kills the majority of the bugs, that pasteurizes it. Yeah, I'd need to double check, but if you put into Google mushrooms, hydrated lime, builder's lime, there'll be forums there that will tell you the difference. It's something to do with magnesium.
Uh-huh. And these forums that you speak of, are there particular ones that you've found helpful for people who might want to go out and find out more? Facebook is probably really good. There's Australian Gourmet Growers, Mushroom Growers is a great one for people that are growing mushrooms, and that's low tech, people just starting out right through to the more advanced. The owner of Aussie Mushroom Supplies is on there, and he's commenting on people's posts all the time, Russell Whitlam, which I think is absolutely brilliant. There's plenty of foraging ones. There's there's the Central Coast regional fungi, which are more aligned to photographing and identifying interesting mushrooms. And it was through that Facebook group that I went on a 4-day trip through the Dorrigo forest up in northern New South Wales. 4 days trekking through there. Some people didn't move more than 100 meters because they found so many different types of fungi. They just wanted to sit down and take their photos, and they took amazing time-lapse photos. I did it with a couple of friends from the Eco Village, where we walked the entire length and taking photos all the way. Absolutely awesome. And you just soak up so much information around mushrooms. But that particular group is more around photographing and identifying really interesting species. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, Facebook has been a great resource. There's one called Mycotech. Some of the more traditional forums, I guess, they have a lot around psychedelics, and then they just have this other part for growing gourmet or medicinal mushrooms. So you do feel a little bit seedy going to some of these forums, and there's all this talk about the psychedelics and the psychonauts and people doing all that. But you know, there are gems of information in some of the other ones. So Mycotech is a good one, and I can't think of the other one, but yeah, there's another. Shroomery.org.
I can always feel you feeling a bit uncomfortable about this, Lincoln. But
I'm waiting for the question on psychedelics, but you know, so.
Well, look, Lincoln, we've got only the most refined audience here.
That's good. That's good.
In saying that, I'm going to ask the question: are there particular species of mushrooms around the Eco Village here that are particularly funky or unusual?
No, unfortunately, not on the grounds. I mean, we do have the Amanita muscarias, which I think are just amazing to look at, and it's great to show the kids because they're like, is there a fairy living under there? They just look awesome. We do have a species called Enthalatis Nitiformis, also known as the ghost mushroom. And if you put a very long exposure camera on it, it glows in the dark. It's one of the few bioluminescent fungi that are out there, and we do have those around. Yeah, plenty of turkey tails. A lot of what you call weed mushrooms, where they're not bad from a biosecurity, but they're just so prolific and kind of like, oh, geez, another one of those. Yeah, you know, I'm starting to put together a bit of a map, a seasonal map of what mushrooms pop up where. So, you know, we can put that on the website. Members can use it, or the public. And if they see a red mushroom with this feature, then it's probably this type of mushroom, just as purely identification purposes.
Mm-hmm. That would be pretty fun to have a almost like a treasure hunt or a scavenger hunt, looking at certain seasons for some of these mushrooms.
Yep.
I know that the kids have really enjoyed going to see the ghost mushrooms with you. Every now and then Lincoln pops something up to the parents group saying, oh, I've seen them, they're back. I want to see them, come along.
Yeah. So April to August is the mushroom season. It's you get mushrooms all year round, but they're most prolific between April and August.
Mm-hmm. Lincoln, I've got one more mushroom growing related question here about whether you need to keep your fruiting chamber warm in winter.
No, I don't. For two reasons. I don't want to waste the electricity, the heating and cooling costs. So I'll grow the mushrooms for that particular temperature range. I was talking about that Google spreadsheet before. I'll grow the cooler climate mushrooms in winter. they grow fine, and as it warms up, I'll shift different varieties.
And would that be the same, Lincoln, if I was growing them in my laundry or my bathroom?
Good question. I would say yes, because your overnight temperatures would probably still drop quite low, even in the bathroom. I don't know if in your awesome thermally efficient house, your straw bale house, it might not dip as much as some of the more suburban type houses. But I think, yeah, probably go for the grow to the climate rather than the artificial climate.
That's awesome. And Lincoln, if we wanted to find out more about how you grew in your bucket system with the straw, have you written it up as a tutorial, or can you point us to one that's got the specifics?
No, I would recommend a gentleman in the US called Shiitake Mushrooms. He has a lot of videos, everything from advanced techniques to very simple. He's a very good orator, and he's got a lot of different videos. And yeah, Shiitake mushroom is probably the best one. There are courses, so Milkwood will do them. Forest Fungi does them. I'm looking to try and get some pull together some course material. I did my first test the other day with some woofers from Spain who were very interested in learning more about mushrooms. I was like, great, well, I'm gonna practice my course on you. And it was about 2 hours. We went through a number of different things, and yeah, I would hope to try and set something like that up, get people along and learn.
That's it. That's awesome. I'd be up for that. I need to upgrade my box system. I'm feeling it now. I need more mushrooms in my life. If there's any last questions, feel free to drop them in either through Facebook or if you're on the Zoom call. Otherwise, Lincoln, is there anything that you would say by way of kind of encouraging people that it's not as scary and overwhelming as it sort of looks like it can get? Yeah, look, there's it's not used all that often, but there's a term called Microphobia, and that is fear of mushrooms. And you really need to think about it's only really the Western culture that have developed Microphobia. Microphobia is the love of mushrooms. Microphobia, and it's it's come from a time where it's grown dirty, it's grown on dung, but indigenous countries or indigenous peoples around the world have been using mushrooms for thousands and thousands of years. So it's really the Western culture that's developed this fear of mushrooms. So I'd encourage people to get the known type of mushrooms from Aussie mushroom suppliers and the other ones that do them. Practice. You'll know very quickly if it's gone wrong. You'll have that green mold. It'll be slimy. You just won't know. But if you planted something there and that grows, then it's a pretty good chance it is. Stay away from wild foraging. Just don't do it unless you're with somebody that's very experienced. The risk is just not worth it. And yeah, I was going to say, if people are on Instagram, you can get me on Geek Garden Cook. That pretty much sums me up in 3 words. I'm a geek, I'm a gardener, and I'm a cook. And I've got I post a lot of things there around what I'm doing with mushrooms. Yeah, you're starting to reveal a bit more of yourself now, Lincoln. That's okay. Karina, any chance we get a recap of how to access the Google Doc? I didn't take notes. Yeah, what is the easiest way to get that out? Or does this chat stay? I can link it in the chat now. Does that work? And I can also put it on the Facebook for those people that are I'm getting the nod from our tech support here. Okay, 1 second. I've just got it here. Let me grab the link. The chat log isn't saved. Oh, there is a file tab on the chat. Okay, copy link. Does that mean that people will be able to access that? Well, it's a Google Doc, so that's okay. The link for those on Zoom, and I'll jump over onto Facebook and put it there as well. That's a public Google document. And so can people just copy and paste that and save it on their own device? Yes. Yep. If they're interested. And if for some reason you don't, you lose it or whatever, feel free to send an email through to the info@Narara Ecovillage email address. Absolutely. And whilst, that's fantastic. Whilst Lincoln's sorting that out, I'll do a bit of a plug too for our on-site tours. We have our next open day coming up tomorrow, but because of the coronavirus and the restrictions and everything, we have to offer pre-booked tours, and we are booked out for tomorrow. But I think that they've opened up the August open day slots if anyone is interested in visiting us. And what else have we got on? I think we still have slots for private tours as well. And otherwise, in a fortnight's time, we'll be doing a Friday night chat with a couple of the members of our parent circle. If ever you try and get a bunch of kids and a bunch of parents together and expect everyone to live in harmony and get along, don't join a community. It's been a fascinating process getting to know the other families here at the village, and we've developed some really neat ways of working through the conflicts that arise very regularly between kids, between parents and kids. And what else have we got on? I think we still have slots for private the other families here at the village, and we've developed some really neat. Oh, that's you, Lincoln. Oh, that's funny. Sorry, guys. Too many screens going on here. I'm not in tech. Oh, that's awesome. Lavosh is saying, if you grew up in Europe like me, you would have been picking mushrooms since the year you could start walking. I dream of a time when my kids will be able to recognise the species around here. That's fantastic. Oh, thanks for putting that link up, Lincoln. And so without further ado, Lincoln, thank you very much for being available tonight to chat to everyone. I think everyone will agree it's just been a mind-blowing kind of night of entertainment. And feel free to flick any more questions through to that email address, and we might see you all in a fortnight's time. Otherwise, Lincoln, any parting words?
No, I've got nothing clever,
No mushroom jokes.
No, not the, maybe on the foraging, the cliche is that all mushrooms are edible, but some of them only once. So just bear that in mind.
That's great. Thank you, Lincoln. I've got John here saying, thanks for being such a fun guy.
Well, I've got questionable morals.
All right. Thanks very much, Lincoln. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in tonight.
Bye.
See you.